All right, let's dive into a story so massive, so epic, it pretty much dwarfs everything else. We're talking about the 4 billion-year journey of life itself. We're going to trace that thread from the very first microscopic spark all the way to the incredible, complex world we live in, and maybe, just maybe, figure out our own place in all of it.
So I mean, just look around. How did we get all this? How does one planet cook up everything from giant blue whales to towering redwood trees to you and me? Well, the answer to that huge question comes down to one single, incredibly powerful idea: evolution. So let's see how it all got started.
You know, before we can even talk about how life changed, we have to go way, way back to the very beginning, to a time before life existed at all, to see how that first spark could have possibly ignited in the first place. To really get this, you have to wrap your head around some serious deep time. So the Earth forms about 4.5 billion years ago. And what's wild is that the first little hints of life pop up only about 500 million years later. But then, look at this next jump. The first actual cells? That took another 2 billion years to happen. So life got a pretty quick start, but complexity? Yeah, that took its sweet time.
So how do you get life from non-life? The leading idea is something called chemical evolution. Just picture the early Earth as this chaotic, planetary factory. You've got this primordial soup of simple molecules, and it's getting zapped by lightning, cooked by volcanoes. And the theory is that all that energy could have caused those simple molecules to link up and form the complex building blocks of life, like RNA and proteins.
And you know, this wasn't just some wild guess. Back in 1953, the famous Miller-Urey experiment basically put this idea in a bottle. They recreated the conditions of that primeval Earth, the atmosphere, the heat, and sent sparks through it to act like lightning. And what happened? Incredibly, they created amino acids, the very things that make up proteins. It was the first real proof that life's building blocks could actually form all by themselves from simple chemistry.
Okay, so we've got the building blocks, and eventually the first simple life forms. But how do we know they didn't just stay that way? What's the proof that this early life branched out and transformed into the millions and millions of species we see today?
Answering that question means we have to become detectives of deep time. The story of evolution has been pieced together from countless clues, all left behind over eons. And when you put them all together, they give us overwhelming proof of life's incredible journey of transformation.
And really, the evidence comes from everywhere. Fossils give us these amazing snapshots of ancient life. Comparative anatomy shows us how the exact same bone structure can be used for a bat's wing and for a human hand. Embryology reveals how different animals look almost identical early on in the womb. But maybe the most powerful clue of all is in our shared chemistry. The fact that you share about half your DNA with a banana is pretty solid proof that we all come from the same fundamental genetic toolkit.
And check this out. This is a perfect example of a really cool concept. On the left, you see placental mammals, like us. On the right, Australian marsupials. Now, these two groups are not closely related at all, and yet look at the insane similarities between the mole and the marsupial mole, or the wolf and the Tasmanian wolf. They evolved on totally different sides of the world, but they came up with similar solutions to similar problems. That's called convergent evolution, and it is a stunning example of adaptation at work.
This whole idea of adapting to your environment, well, that brings us to the main man himself, Charles Darwin. During his famous voyage, he saw something that would literally change our understanding of life forever. It's a process called adaptive radiation.
And here is the classic example you've probably heard of: Darwin's finches. On the Galapagos Islands, Darwin noticed that all these different islands had finches with wildly different beaks, and he pieced it together. A single ancestor species must have gotten to the islands, and over generations, its descendants radiated outwards, evolving specialized beaks to eat whatever food was available. Thick beaks for cracking tough seeds, slender ones for snatching insects. One species had become many, each one perfectly tuned to its little corner of the world.
And listen, this isn't just something that happened a long time ago. Evolution is happening right now, all around us. In fact, a lot of the time, we're the ones causing it. The rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria is a terrifyingly perfect example of natural selection in action. We use an antibiotic, it kills most of the bacteria. But if any of them just happen to have a random mutation that helps them resist it, they survive, and they're the ones that multiply. We are literally creating superbugs through evolution.
So, we've seen the evidence. But what's the actual engine that drives all this change? How does it really work? Well, the core mechanism is natural selection, but it doesn't just work in one simple way. It actually has a few different modes of operation.
First up, you've got stabilizing selection. This is basically when it pays to be average. A great example is human birth weight. Babies that are too small or too big tend to have lower survival rates, so nature selects for babies right there in the middle. The whole population becomes more uniform, centered around that successful average.
Then there's directional selection. This happens when the environment changes, and suddenly a trait that used to be rare becomes the key to survival. The whole population's average shifts in a new direction. Our superbugs are a perfect example, right? Resistance was rare until we introduced antibiotics, and then it became the most valuable trait a bacterium could possibly have.
And finally, there's disruptive selection, and this is when things get really interesting. This is when it's actually bad to be average, and the extremes are the ones that thrive. Imagine you have birds in a place with only very big, hard seeds or very small, soft seeds. A bird with a medium-sized beak would be out of luck, but birds with huge beaks or tiny beaks would do great. Over time, this pressure could actually split one population into two, potentially creating a brand new species.
To really understand what causes evolution, it's actually helpful to imagine a world without it. And that's what the Hardy-Weinberg principle is all about. It describes this hypothetical, perfectly stable population where gene frequencies never ever change. It's a theoretical baseline, a perfect state of equilibrium that in the real world is never ever met.
And the reason that perfect equilibrium is never met is because the real world is messy. These 5 factors are constantly stirring the pot and pushing things off balance. You've got new genes arriving through migration, you've got random chance or genetic drift, which can wipe out traits for no good reason, you've got mutations creating brand new options, and recombination shuffling them all around. And then, layered on top of all of that, you have natural selection, always favoring the combinations that work best right here, right now.
Okay, so now let's bring this epic story home. Let's turn the lens on ourselves, because the fossil record tells a truly dramatic story of our own journey, from our ancient primate ancestors all the way to modern Homo sapiens.
This timeline really hits the highlights of our family history. Look at the huge shifts here. About 4 million years ago, our ancestors stood up and started walking on 2 legs, a massive change. Then, tool use shows up. Then look at this, a huge leap in brain size with Homo erectus. We even see our close relatives, the Neanderthals, with brains that were on average even larger than ours. All of this before our own species, Homo sapiens, finally shows up and eventually spreads across the entire planet.
So, what was it that made our particular lineage so different? Ultimately, it's the story of what's between our ears. The evolution of complex language and self-consciousness wasn't just another adaptation, it was an absolute game changer. It's what allowed for culture, for technology, and for one single species to completely reshape the planet.
And this brings us to a final, pretty profound thought. Evolution didn't stop with us. It never stops. It's a relentless, ongoing process that doesn't have a final chapter. Which means the ultimate question isn't just, where did we come from? It's, where are we going? What are we becoming?